In 17th century Japan, a new era of peace was dawning. The age of civil war was over, and under the stable rule of the Tokugawa shogunate, culture was exploding. In this world of refined art and rigid social codes, power was held by samurai lords and wealthy merchants, but the most celebrated person in the entire country was not a warrior or a ruler, she was a courtesan. A woman whose intellect was as famous as her beauty, and whose name was synonymous with perfection. Her name was Yoshino. To understand her, you must first understand her title, Tayu. This was not just any courtesan. A Tayu was the absolute pinnacle of the pleasure quarters, a woman trained from childhood not just in the arts of seduction, but in the highest forms of culture. They were masters of poetry, calligraphy, the tea ceremony, music, and intellectual conversation. They were living works of art, and Yoshino was considered the greatest masterpiece of her generation. Born around 1606 to a samurai family, her life took a sharp turn when she was entrusted as a child to a brothel in Kyoto's Shimabara district. She began her life as a kamuro, a young attendant, embarking on the arduous journey to become a Tayu. It was a world of immense competition and discipline, where only the most talented and resilient could hope to reach the top. And Yoshino did more than reach the top, she redefined it. Her fame was legendary. To spend an evening in her company was the ultimate status symbol, a privilege reserved for the most powerful and cultured men in Japan. They came not just for her beauty, but for her mind. She could challenge a master poet, defeat a strategist at the game of Go, and discuss philosophy with the nation's leading scholars. She was not for sale. Her time and respect had to be earned. Among the sea of powerful suitors, one man stood out. His name was Hayate, a wealthy merchant, but more importantly, a man of deep culture and intellect. He was not just another client seeking to own the most beautiful object in Kyoto. He saw past the perfect exterior of the Tayu and recognized the brilliant woman beneath. He fell in love not just with Yoshino, but with her soul. And Yoshino, who could have her pick of any man in Japan, found herself drawn to him. In Jaeki, she found someone who didn't just admire her skills, but understood them. He was not a client to be entertained, but a partner to be engaged. A true meeting of minds and hearts took place. But their love faced an insurmountable wall. A Tayu belonged to the world of the pleasure quarters. She was a star, meant to be admired by all but owned by none. To be with one man, to leave the quarter and live as a wife, was a betrayal of her status and a near impossibility. Their love was a fantasy, trapped within the gilded cage of her profession. To make it real would require a sacrifice of unimaginable proportions. The love between the courtesan and the merchant deepened, a secret world they built for themselves amidst the public spectacle of her life. Their connection was often expressed not in grand declarations, but in the subtle, elegant language of poetry and art, the language they both understood best. One famous story perfectly captures the depth of their bond. On a snowy day, Jaeki visited Yoshino. Looking out at the garden, she remarked with a poetic sigh, "How this snow resembles white cotton." Her comment was a waka, a short, elegant poem, a test of wit and a lament for the cold, fleeting nature of beauty. Jaeki, understanding her meaning instantly, excused himself. He returned not with a clever reply, but with an extravagant gesture. He had bought up vast quantities of the finest white cotton and had his servants cover the entire garden with it, creating a perfect, unmelting layer of snow. He had transformed her poetic metaphor into a stunning reality. Stunned and deeply moved, Yoshino looked at the impossible scene before her and completed the exchange. "And how this cotton," she replied, "resembles real snow." This was more than a witty game. It was a profound statement. He had shown her he would do anything, even the impossible, to answer the desires of her heart. She in turn acknowledged that his gesture was as pure and beautiful as nature itself. It was a perfect meeting of souls. This moment was a turning point. Jaeki knew he could no longer live with just a piece of her heart. He wanted all of it. He resolved to do what seemed impossible, to buy her freedom. This was not a simple transaction. To ransom a Tayu of Yoshino's stature, a process called miyuki, was astronomically expensive. The cost was equivalent to millions of dollars in today's currency, a sum designed to be prohibitively high. Jaeki was prepared to sacrifice everything. He began selling off his priceless art collection, his properties, his entire fortune, all to raise the ransom. For him, a life with Yoshino was worth more than any material wealth. Meanwhile, Yoshino had to navigate the complex politics of the quarter. Leaving was not her right. It was a privilege that had to be granted. She was their greatest asset, and they would not let her go easily. Finally, in 1631, he succeeded. Jaeki paid the monumental sum. At the age of 26, Yoshino Tayu, the most celebrated woman in Japan, walked out of the gates of the pleasure quarter for the last time. She was no longer a Tayu, a living work of art for public consumption. She was Matsuda Tokuko, a woman who had won her freedom and was about to begin a new life, as the wife of the man who had given up everything for her. They had achieved the impossible, a fairy tale ending bought with a fortune. But can a legend ever truly become a normal person? Can a star, accustomed to the adoration of an entire nation, find happiness in the quiet life of a merchant's wife? Their dream had been realized, but the hardest part of their journey was just beginning. The legend of Yoshino Tayu ended at the Shimabara Gate. The life of Matsuda Tokuko had just begun. She embraced her new existence with the same grace and intelligence she had applied to her former profession. The transition from being the center of public attention to the quiet life of a merchant's wife seemed to be seamless. She had traded a life of performance for a life of authenticity. Their home became a celebrated salon, a gathering place for the great cultural figures of the day. But now, she was not the main attraction. She was the co-host, a partner with her husband in fostering the arts. They were a true power couple of the Kane cultural era, their influence shaping the artistic tastes of the capital. While they never had children of their own, their relationship was said to be one of deep, harmonious affection. But beneath the surface of this idyllic life, another side of Tokuko emerged. She became a devout follower of Nichiren Buddhism. With her own funds, likely what remained of her immense earnings as a Tayu, she founded a temple, Geisha. This was more than just a rich woman's vanity project. The temple was a profound statement. It was a place of prayer and salvation, not just for herself, but for all the women still trapped in the world of suffering, as the pleasure quarters were known. Having escaped the gilded cage, she did not forget those she had left behind. She created a spiritual sanctuary, a testament to her compassion and her faith. She had found freedom, true love, and spiritual purpose. It was a life of perfect, balanced happiness, but it was to be a brief spring. After years of living in the demanding, unhealthy environment of the pleasure quarters, her health began to fail. In 1643, just 12 years after leaving Shimabara, Matsuda Tokuko died. She was only 38 years old. Her life, which had burned so brightly, was extinguished far too soon. She was buried at Geisha, the temple she had built, a final resting place of her own creation. Her life was over, a short brilliant flame, but the story of Yoshino Tayu was far from finished. How would history remember her? As the perfect courtesan, the devoted wife, the pious founder of a temple? Her death was not an end, but the beginning of her transformation into something even more powerful, an immortal legend. Death could not contain Yoshino Tayu. In the centuries that followed, her life story became a foundational myth of Japanese culture. She was no longer just a historical figure. She was an icon, a symbol of the ultimate woman who achieved success, love, and spiritual grace against all odds. As with all great legends, the line between fact and fiction began to blur. The real woman, who was likely a brilliant and pragmatic businesswoman as well as an artist, was reshaped into a more romantic figure. Stories were invented to heighten the drama of her life. One of the most famous legends tells of the imperial regent, Kono Nobuhiro, one of the most powerful men in the country, attempting to buy her contract. In the story, he offers her a life of unimaginable luxury at the imperial court. But Yoshino, in a grand act of defiance, rejects him, declaring her love for the merchant, Jaeki. This story, while almost certainly a later invention, is crucial to her legend. It transforms her from a woman making a life choice into a romantic heroine who defied the highest authority in the land for the sake of true love. It makes her story not just a romance, but a rebellion. Her legacy is not just confined to stories. It is a living tradition. Every year in April, at the Geisha temple she founded, a memorial service is held. A modern Tayu from Shimabara, dressed in the spectacular fashion of her profession, leads a procession in Yoshino's honor. It is a vibrant, beautiful ceremony that connects the present day directly back to her life and influence. Yoshino Tayu's story endures because it operates on so many levels. It is a tale of social mobility, of a woman who used her talent to rise to the very top of a rigid hierarchy. It is a story of artistic genius, celebrating a culture that valued poetry and beauty as much as warfare. And above all, it is one of the great love stories, a testament to the idea that true connection can overcome any barrier, whether of status, wealth, or social convention. She was a courtesan who became a cultural icon, a performer who became a pious Buddhist, a woman in a gilded cage who found a way to buy her own freedom. Yoshino Tayu crafted her life with the same skill and artistry she applied to a poem or a tea ceremony, and in doing so, she created her own perfect, immortal legend.